Network is absolutely free.
Hello everyone and welcome back into the GSMC Dead Ball Sports Podcast, and for our third segment of today's show, let's talk about the Chiefs' opponent. Perhaps, like I said before the break, the most worthy of opponents to stop the Chiefs' dynasty. This iteration of the Philadelphia Eagles. Because 2 years ago, a lot of people thought that yes, they could compete with this Chiefs team. It would be very tough to beat them because Jalen Hurts was just beginning to improve. That was his best season as a pro. And then this year, now people are really starting to believe that after the events of 2 years ago, that this Eagles team is even more special after an incredible offseason really altered how we view this team and how they played on the field as a result. So let's talk a little bit about how the Eagles got here. And I do believe you know perhaps the first reason as to how they did. Not just the offseason, but who they got in the offseason. Saquon Barkley. He is Super Bowl material. He is MVP material. And speaking of that, I would have loved to see that voting conundrum had Saquon Barkley not set out that last regular season game and had broken Eric Dingerson's single season record. But ultimately, what I loved about this addition was because it completely changed the tenor of how the Eagles played offense. They relied on Saquon Barkley as the bell cow back. He paid off, and they find themselves in a situation where if Saquon goes off, they most likely win this football game. Because the Chiefs really, even though they have a stout defense and they have one of the best defensive minds on their side, they've never faced a guy as physical, as dominant, as elusive as Saquon Barkley in this dynastic run. So the way that Saquon Barkley impacts this game is huge because the Chiefs now have to think differently about their defensive game plan, unlike 2 years ago where they only really had to worry about Jalen Hurts adding his diverse legs to that running attack 2 years ago. Now you have to worry not just about Jalen Hurts potentially taking off and having a big game on the ground, but perhaps the best running back in the league coming off one of the best single-season running back seasons in NFL history. So that's why the Eagles are here, and that's why this might be the best chance for anyone to snap the Chiefs dynasty in half. But then, let's talk about the quarterback and how he has changed his philosophies, especially this season, and the reason why the Eagles got here because of him. He controls the ball when it matters. A lot of people, after that performance in the Super Bowl against the Chiefs 2 years ago, viewed Jalen Hurts as someone who would take a huge leap to stardom. And it didn't necessarily turn out that way, but this season, when all the eyes were on Saquon, Jalen Hurts played within himself better than he even did 2 years ago. Because that Jalen Hurts was a little bit more electrifying. In fact, was asked to be more electrifying because the fact that they did not necessarily have the stoutest of run games. But now that Saquon is here, just taking on a role of someone who can now pass the football with a little bit more poise and presence and meaning, most importantly, because when the Eagles pass the football, even though in a situation like this where they're playing a dynastic Chiefs team, you would expect them, if they were passing, to play from behind. Jalen Hurts passes the football with a little bit more intention, with a little bit more knowledge, and most importantly, with the intent of protecting it. He's not necessarily going to be someone like he was 2 years ago in being carefree about how he threw the football, because now he knows he has a get-out-of-jail-free card in the backfield with Saquon. So when he passes the football, it puts even more strain on opposing defense because Saquon Barkley has really worn your front down. You really don't know how to defend the run game. And now Jalen Hurts is passing on his critical downs. And so that puts defenses in a bind even more so than when Saquon's running the football, because at least you know when Saquon's running the football, you're going to have to stop him. But combine that with the ability Hurts now has to not only pass the football with more intention, but control it and play within himself a bit more. That's scary, and that's one of the main reasons why the Eagles got here as well. It's not just about Saquon Barkley's play in critical situations. It was also about Jalen Hurts, and a lot of people didn't even realize it because his stats weren't as eye-popping as they were 2 years ago. So, while he may not even play a critical role Sunday night, look for Hurts in moments where he's got to have it to make the right reads. Most importantly, do them with a little bit more intention. Because I'm not knocking his performance 2 years ago, but this one is going to be with a lot more intention, with a lot more desire to win, because he knows that they have the superior team, and he knows that he can rely on a lot more people than 2 years ago. But now, let's talk about actually before we get to that, let's talk about another part of this offense that's so hard to analyze and so hard to diagnose as an opposing defense. This offensive line. It's the NFL's best offensive line. Of course, when healthy, and it might not be Sunday night, we still don't know the status of Jurgens and Dickerson, but when all four of these tackles and guards play, I really think that the continuity and the fluidity of these guys, not just in the run game, but the pass game as well, even though the run game is integral to their own success. They are an offensive line that wins you football games. And I feel like no matter what offensive game plan this team employs Sunday night, whether they run the football, dominate up front, get out to an early lead and ultimately win this going away, which I could see happening, or it's a close game and they've got to win every single snap, I trust this offensive line. And while I do think that the Chiefs' defensive line is going to be the more important unit because they're up against this O-line, if this O-line wins consistently, we could be in for a bit of a surprise. That's how highly I revere this offensive line and how I view this offensive line because of their consistencies all season long. And even if Jurgens and Dickerson aren't ready to go, I trust whoever needs to step in because it's all about continuity with this offensive line. And they know ultimately what they have to do to win their team football games. And it's that continuity, if this offensive line is fully healthy, that's scary to me. Because this Chiefs defensive front has won consistently throughout their dynastic run. But this Eagles O-line offers you different problems because of how specific their scheme has become. It has become all about the run game. And it's much harder to defend the run game against an elite O-line and a back like Saquon Barkley. And knowing that Hurts is dynamic not just in the run game, but also in the receiving game as well, in the passing game with those receivers as well, and makes this a scary proposition for the Chiefs. So this Eagles O-line puts pressure on the Chiefs' defense unlike any offensive line they have faced in these moments in their dynastic run thus far. So that's why I have to applaud this Eagles O-line. But now let's talk about the coaching. And it kind of goes in two, because while Sirianni certainly was a big part of it, Vic Fangio we're going to talk about a little bit later as well. He deserves his flowers. But let's talk about Nick Sirianni, because just last year, Nick Sirianni was in a situation where, after being one of the final unbeaten teams, and that's another hint into what we're going to be talking about a little bit later in the show, hint, that particular streak, I don't want to give away just yet. After he got them out to that undefeated start and they collapsed on the stretch, people were seriously inquiring about how Nick Sirianni really impacted this team. Was he getting through to this team? Was he the right fit for Philly? And then this season, he quite literally revamped the look of this locker room. Most importantly, adopted a culture of consistent winning week after week. And remember, this was also a team that started off 2-2. They didn't necessarily get off on the strongest foot. There were problems early in the season. But there on out, they dominated both offensively and defensively, and you have to give Nick Sirianni his flowers. Even though the coordinators definitely played a part in it as well, Nick Sirianni literally from the ground up rebuilt this locker room and said, you can trust me to take you to the promised land consistently. And that's why I feel like this Eagles team has started to believe that they could be the team to end this Chiefs run. Because Nick Sirianni really rejuvenated the energy in this locker room and really adapted to an offensive philosophy this team got behind throughout the season that could lead them to Super Bowl victory Sunday night. So that can't go unnoticed. But let's talk about the final reason, which I think is a little bit more impactful considering the fact that this unit 2 years ago kind of got exploited a little bit, but this year goes into this matchup hungrier and much better and far superior than any defense that Chiefs have ever faced, and that's down to Vic Fangio. Vic Fangio really revived this defense from where it was 2 years ago, and I feel like no matter what happens Sunday night, even if it comes down to an offensive shootout, I now trust this Eagles defense to really shore up in the crucial moments, unlike last 2 years ago, rather. Because Vic Fangio really has developed this scheme that relies on all three phases, particularly on certain players at each level to make impacts. Up front, it's Jalen Carter from the interior that really slows you down, muddies the pocket if you're an opposing offense. And then at the second level, it's Zach Bond, really one of the best free agent additions in NFL history, in my opinion. And this was a guy no one had even heard about a couple of years ago. This is a guy who is really special, works sideline to sideline, helps in the run support, stuffs you at the line, and makes critical plays in the backfield for you. And then the secondary, just all around, whether it's the young guys in Mitchell and DeJean really stepping up as elite cover corners throughout the year, or guys like Slay, Blankenship, who have been here, have the experience, really know what needs to be done in these moments. It's been an incredible job by Vic Fangio, and it's the reason why a lot of people think that this could be the Eagles' time. It's this defense is going to be the best unit on the field Sunday, and I believe that potentially, if it comes down to critical moments, this defense will be more prepared than 2 years ago. But let me know what you think in the comments about this, because that will just about do it for this segment. Coming up next, we make some bold predictions for the Super Bowl. Will there be an unsung hero? Will there be an unexpected MVP? Tune in to find out after this short break.